Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Sylvie Milverton with us. Milverton was about to say it in French for some reason. She's
Right.
the CEO and co-founder at Lynx, host of the Talent is Everywhere podcast. She's a board member, female ed tech fellow. FEF2. And she's giving all workers access to quality education, which is a cause that I'm quite obsessed about in my own ways, right? I started CO Uni not so long ago to teach kids entrepreneurship. I think it's very important in the age of AI. The kids are going to come in a different market. So quite excited to jump right in. Sylvie, maybe you can tell us a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. This is very fun. I love podcasts. I'm Sylvie, living in France. For the past few years, I've been CEO and co-founder of Lynx. So it's a workforce skills platform for that workers that other platforms leave behind. And we're focused on Europe and EMEA. And before that, I had a long career in education, CFO at big education companies in Europe and Latin America.
Right.
Yeah.
Super interesting. What prompted you to start your own business?
It's a good question. I had a really good corporate career and I just had like an itch to scratch on two things. One is like the magic wand of education and how much it can impact people. And everything I saw working in Latin America and Mexico, like in, mid 2000s, just seeing like how much those universities, like middle bottom of the pyramid, how much an impact we had overall on Mexico and how you can change people's lives. And when I came to Europe, I just saw things like much more old fashioned. And I thought, okay, there's something that we can do in terms of connecting like even workers to good education. And then also, at some point you reach in your career and you're like, I want to build the kind of company where I want to work with the kind of people I want to work with, the kind of culture I want. And so it all came together to take the risk and launch my company.
It's interesting because I'm originally from Montreal, Canada. I live in Oaxaca, in Mexico, and the education here, yeah, it seems even worse than in Europe or in Canada. You're saying that you could build more change here, faster change. What was your evaluation of the educational system here, and what do you mean by the European system being older? Is it like the typical aristocracy style and low? High resistance to change and low change overall. What do you mean specifically there?
Yeah, all of that. So we have that in common. I was born in Canada. Yeah. And then I lived in Mexico a long time. So we have the Canada Mexico connection. Listen, what we saw, we had universities. So it was really like targeting a segment of the population that wouldn't normally have access to education and, big universities with, hundreds of thousands of students. And then at some point we realized that there was a market for working adults. And so how do you offer undergrad degrees to working adults? And then we realized, okay, there's a big market for online education. And so just like flexible models where you're reaching, you know, not only like a traditional like 18 to 22-year-old and finding different ways that people can learn and adapt it to their schedules and their hours and online. And then when I came to France, I just saw like just a much more rigid system where you're sort of set in high school of what you're going to study, and then you do your first degree, you do your second degree, and just much less flexibility, much less openness to online. Of course, the pandemic changed a lot of that. And seeing that once people were in companies very set in their way and very hard to, other than like a very structured way of reskilling, you just realize like, listen, a boot camp, a short course, a certificate. There's so many like different ways of thinking about education. And I just thought, okay, there's more that we can do here.
And are certificates still valid? Isn't the best way in the age of AI is like to build something with the help of AI and show your work as a certificate?
It's a good question. We think about this a lot. I think everything is changing quickly. So there's certainly something to like, how are we going to work? How are we going to learn? And definitely working through AI, you can learn so many things, but there's a vast like gray area between, are we going to do like a 4-year degree that's super traditional, versus am I going to sit with my chat GPT and learn? But you have a good point that it's changing. But you even saw like, listen, like some few years ago, the big thing was like coding boot camp. So like intense 6-month coding boot camp, learn to do web dev. Now that's no longer the thing because you're saying like AI is doing all that coding, but there's still something you need to learn. So I think that there's definitely, you still need to learn things. You still need to learn how to use AI. Now, what is the way to learn it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think AI can help in learning as well, but you need to ask it the right question, right? And the higher quality your question, the higher quality the answer, and then it's just a rabbit hole from there. And yes, it's pretty crazy how many apps and companies ChatGPT replaced overnight. Obviously, the adoption was not like from zero to one to a day to another, but yeah, coding boot camps. Like nowadays, you just like open up ChatGPT and code your own app. It tells you about the bugs and so forth. You can share screenshots, and it's pretty insane how quickly it evolved. I personally was reading Wikipedia a lot to learn new stuff and go into rabbit hole, but nowadays it's just me and ChatGPT. Even in the bed, reading about like very niche topics, right? And I think that's the best way to learn, and also to work and to ask it questions simultaneously, so that your biochemistry is receptive, your high serotonin, and you get rewarded every time you hear something new. So for your students, do you have you integrated AI yet? Is it part of the curriculum?
So we're a marketplace model primarily up until now, where we're partnering with learning partners and proposing their programs on our platform. And so some of our partners, most of them, all of them, have some kind of AI integration. On our current platform, actually, we're doing some exciting things. One is we have a nice AI advisor that helps learners like figure out what they want to do and encourage them. And then we're in the process of actually developing our own content. And we're just thinking through like what is the right way to integrate AI. And we had exactly this conversation. Like the way we learn is so different. And shouldn't we also be building internally our own tool? Because to your point, like there was something, having a certificate from a recognized provider to say, I learned how to do this. I still think that is going to have value, but being able to, let's say, but that certificate is going to have to show that you've acquired certain skills. And so up until now, what we were saying was because you've worked with this certain school, that's how I have the check mark. Like, okay, I know you acquired those skills. But now with AI, there's so many other ways that you can get assessments and get validation of those skills. And so we are in our product roadmap thinking like, okay, how can we develop our own content to show that these skills have been acquired?
Yeah. Can you actually scrape these free courses and develop your own content out of them? I'm asking because yeah, I remember the Udemy days or the Coursera days. I'm not saying you're the same, or EDX, but yeah, it was so boring to just listen to a course, and the human brain is not made to listen to something for a while. It's made to build, and to be creative and to build off that. That's how you get really good really fast. So can you scrape the content of these course, feed it to an AI, and totally modify the teaching style to the students?
So that's actually what we do. So our platform has some nice things, and I'll plug for it. And one is that you can launch it quite quickly, and we do take nice free content that's on the general internet and curate it and make it easy to find on our platform. Of course, you could just be Googling about, but most people, don't sort of know what to find, and we target workers who maybe don't, how to find that. So one is like we do have that sort of existing content. But to your point, it's like everything feels boring and old-fashioned, like so quickly. And so we do we're working with other tools, that are these sort of authoring tools where you can basically feed it different information. You put videos, you put PDFs, and it creates a course. But there's still, you still have to check it. Like it still does a few things a little off. You still have to kind of have some subject matter expertise and kind of know how to do a course, make sure the quiz is right, make sure the video is right. But it's moving so quickly that soon I think there'll be like limited human interaction. But yeah, definitely, like so many courses, like it's right boring, and that's why we're trying to do something kind of quote unquote better than a Coursera and Udemy that's a little bit maybe flat or feels outdated.
Do you feel that the future is fully freelancer, meaning that there would be a software corporation that would just place workers in specific gigs in, say, 10 years from now, probably an AGI at this point? I very much feel so. And if so, if you feel that way too, how does that modify the actual curriculum? And does that place validity on being hired? Because when my clients hire me, they don't check my certificate and my education. They just check my work and my results.
I think there's a few questions in there. One is like, is a certificate and an education the same signal that it was even like 2, 5, 10 years ago of knowledge? Like before, this person went to this school, therefore you know these things. I think quickly we're, moving away from that. It's much more like, can you achieve these results and can you do these things? Now, the other question of, are we going to move away from like jobs and just be a bunch of freelancers? I feel like, the general human population, people are risk averse. Like they like working in a company, and companies like having like stable people. So I feel like will be, I don't know, a future lifetime. I mean, who knows? Maybe humanity can change, but I feel like people like stability. So I don't know about that.
Yeah, just double click on that one. I'm quite certain about that thesis. Obviously, I come from a biased place as an entrepreneur, right? But I think corporations are going to slash most of their workforce and replace with agents. That's pretty much a certainty because they're profit first. People think it's like a family, but it's not. It's profit first. It's old investors at the top that are asking for returns, and that's pretty much it for most corporation. And then my vision would be, yes, we would still provide stability to folks, and that would be gig workers at this point. It would just be a software, an AGI that would place job opportunities or gig opportunities to these humans. And also these humans would have their own agents. That last point, I'm not too sure because they need to learn managerial skills and coding skill. But ultimately, that's the only way that I can see humanity surviving the behemoth and groundbreaking event that will be the AGI or super intelligence.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this sort of like old video. Now I can't remember, of course, who had it, but the whole thing about like horses. Like if you look at how many horses there were on the world, like the beginning of the 20th century, and now there are fewer horses through no fault of the horse. We just don't need them anymore because they were replaced, by the engine, and then cars and automation. And so it's like, yeah, the need for that goes down. So, right, what are these human skills and how much are agents replacing them? And then what are we doing with our days if we're not, working? Like, gosh, I can think of a lot of better things than like copy pasting and, however many manual, tedious. I had to send something to a bank and the PDF didn't work and I had to scan. I mean, listen, if a computer can do that for me, great.
Yeah. Tell me a bit more about your day to day. What does it look like a day in your CEO life?
That's a good question. Let me see. So yeah, I'm pretty like structured and organized, maybe because I was CFO for a long time. So we run the whole company using the EOS system. And so I'm always like checking my to-do list. Every Tuesday we have like, a team L10 meeting. And so I'm like, we're still small enough where I actually have a lot of work to do. So I spend maybe half the day like making sure that I'm delegating whatever. And then I do spend half my day, writing LinkedIn posts, right? Following up with clients, making proposals, doing sales calls. I do a lot of sales calls and, checking in with the product team. So, but I'm pretty structured. I try not to be all over the place.
Yeah. Do you feel you still think or view the business world through CFO lens?
Also a good question. I have switched. I definitely now I'm in like entrepreneurship, like CEO mode, but still, if I open an Excel, like I was doing that actually before we spoke, I was like looking at my cash flow. I can still feel my body like relax when I'm in that mode of like looking at financial projections. It's like, oh, I am going home, but I am so much happier like doing the CEO job. But yeah, definitely like my natural habitat, I think is the other one.
It's pretty much the opposite for most entrepreneurs looking at a spreadsheet in their cash flow. It's like a very stressful exercise for most.
You're right. That's like my like how I actually have to force myself to like delegate and not spend all my time like tidying up a database. This is like a terrible
Do you
confession.
use AI on that level as well to classify the sheets? I know that Google Sheets brought Gemini 2 or 3 days ago to them. Have you used AI to improve the visibility on your cash flow and to optimize better formulas?
Yeah, like as much as possible. Yeah, between Zapier and automating things, and then like Perplexity is my best friend because like I'm old, man, so I do not remember like, and then the formula. So I'm constantly Perplexity is my best friend for figuring out how to code and how to improve all my files.
And what are your financial models to lead a healthy company? I know that you raised some capital. Any other tips for us not so finance savvy entrepreneurs?
I don't know how finance savvy I always am. Yeah, I think it's just like be in the details. Just look at every expense. Like I just have super, super detailed file and just looking at every expense, looking ahead, and then knowing like what's the moment to make decisions, because once the money's gone, it's gone. And so what's the moment when you have to say like, okay, we stop this or we reinvest in this? And I think also being a bit brave, like, you always want to save money. So it's easy to just say, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. But I mean, you do have to invest in marketing and in sales and in people. And so kind of being brave. And then I guess the last thing is like just set times. Like we just did we brought in somebody to help us with LinkedIn, did it for some number of months and said, okay, if after this amount of time, it's giving us X or Y is that result, we stop. And then to be pretty disciplined about stopping at that time.
Right. You answered the very interesting answers to my questions that I present you for this podcast. One of which that is very much true is that we see the world through very biased lens, right? With how we want the world to be rather than how the world is. You mentioned the car crashes, right? People like traveling in car instead of an airplane. Yeah, that is way more dangerous, right? To get into a car crash, while airplanes are safer just because they've seen a Netflix movie about a plane crash or something. How do you make sure to separate yourself from these bias and that the oh so big bias of I want to see the world how I want it to be and not how it really is?
I think one is like just recognizing like we all have biases. Like I can tell, listen, like I'm from a certain, I went to a certain kind of school. I grew up in a certain kind of house. I like people that like are mathy and analytical. And so it's so easy that when I'm picking people to be like, oh, I want the person, like of course, I'm more comfortable around people like myself. So I think one is just being aware that we're going to have this bias. And then I think also balancing, like when we're entrepreneurs, we have to see like the hockey stick, like we have to see the growth, but to force yourself to say like, okay, what's the bad scenario? Like, how do I look at this? Not thinking, oh, this is going to keep growing, but like, how to look at the data in a better way. And also, I think there's no way around it. I mean, I think even if you're smart and even if like this is a problem, like we see 2 car crashes and we 2 airplane crashes, so we feel like it's super dangerous, or even like these self-driving cars. Gosh, there's like 2 crashes and we have a panic attack. Meanwhile, 40,000 people die in the US every year in a car crash, and we have no trouble with that at all. So anyway, I think just being aware and knowing that we're going to screw it up and that we just have biases regardless of how holier than thou or more morally superior we are in fighting them.
Another cool answer that you had is, what do you believe most entrepreneurs secretly suffer from, but no one's talking about?
I think it's that like everybody's like a bit screwed up. I mean, that even if like that we all kind of need therapy. I mean, I don't know if it's entrepreneurs or anything, but I mean, I just think one of the things of life, and I don't know if it's like it's the stage of life I'm at, but I mean, it's like a constant quest for understanding what motivates us, what are our, the pains from our youth or from childhood, or how are we acting this out in business. And I just think everybody, no matter like, even if you have it together, I mean, you have to be just conscious of this, and it's going to come out in different moments and different things trigger it. And yeah, I just think everybody's got some crap they're dealing with, and that you either want to face it or you don't want to face it, but we all should.
Yeah, I don't think it's just like the phase of your life right now. I think it's the era that we're all in, which is the AI era, which drastically accelerates everything to a point that we can't keep up, right? To fully explore ChatGPT or get full ChatGPT benefits, we would need at least 10 years right now. It's like a never-ending encyclopedia, right? And it's getting better. They update it every quarter, right? So now we would need 30 years, 50 years, 100 years to process all that information. And a lot of entrepreneurs are overwhelmed by that. And entrepreneurship, even before AI, was like super overwhelming, right? Because there's so many data points, there's so many things to do, and you can't hire enough humans. You don't know if they're good enough. You don't know if your systems are gonna break apart. They always break, like, and then you need to extinguish them. And yeah, if you manage humans, you also manage their emotions, right? In organizations, and yeah, most humans, not entrepreneurial people, they don't have that same emotional regulation. Sort of a bit like children that you need to take care of. So like we need to take all that weight on our shoulders as entrepreneur. And I guess therapy is just a way to open up and release all that stuck up energy, right?
Yeah, and just like process it all and figure it out. And I was, having another conversation the other day on my podcast with a woman. She's a coach, and you realize, like, okay, there's some moments where what you need is a coach, like a high performance coach. There's another time where you need like how to be a better manager. And there's other times where you need like, how do I deal with these different levels of anxiety? But I do think it just feels like now is between like a difficult time, just generally, like AI plus like politics. I don't know. It just
The
seems like
tariffs.
a lot going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, anytime Mr. T gets elected, a lot of us like lose our sanity, right? Because it's the opposite of truth, was what this man stands for, opposite of science. And yeah, just like personally, I don't share much value with this guy. So that's one. But also then the tariffs, right? The tariffs economically, I think they froze business for like 2 to 3 months. Me, I could directly feel it, right? Because I prospect a lot for a lot of people with cold emails, and I could see that the market was literally frozen in B2B. No one wanted to pull the trigger. No one wanted to invest a couple of thousands per month. So that was pretty hard, right? And yeah, I think, like you said, there's different modalities. One of my favorite one is a psychotherapist GPT. I do have a real psychotherapist as well and coaches, but that one's always with me, knows everything about me. So it offers the right solution. Sometimes it's a tactical solution. Sometimes it's an emotional one. Sometimes it's like just go take a long walk in the night. Sometimes it's go spend some time in your jacuzzi to shut your brain down and just not think about anything, right? So I think that's quite helpful to know as an entrepreneur that you can have all these tools to release the tension. Now you mentioned your podcast. Tell me a bit more about that, the thesis behind it, the guests you had on, the systems behind it.
Okay, sure. So I love podcasts. Like I have been listening to podcasts, I don't know, for like 15 years. I mean, before there even was a thing of a podcast, my favorite kind of entertainment more than like TV or movies. So when I realized that I could have one, of course, I would do this. And so we call it Talent is Everywhere. And it's really talking to HR leaders and any kind of people about just like opportunities in HR, about talent development. So I've spoken with like chief learning officers of big corporations, HR leaders in smaller companies, different coaches, HR influencers. Yeah, all type of people. I think I've been doing it for a year, and maybe we've done maybe 20 episodes, and yeah, it's fun. And I think it's also, how to say, like as like my natural, like I'm not somebody that's always sort of doing a podcast and doing such a thing, and I had to learn. And so listening to other ones, I really like Anna Sale has a podcast called Death, Sex, and Money. I like Lenny's podcast, like people that are really good interviewers. So it's just like, okay, let me learn a new skill. Let me see if I can learn how to interview and be comfortable on a podcast. And I think I'm getting better. Not every episode is great, but mostly we're pretty good.
And what makes a good interviewer? How do you get better at the art of interviewing?
One is, and I don't always do this very well, like think of different responses, like being very engaged, like not always saying like, oh, good question, or that's interesting. And I think also the better ones I've done is when I have a better arc of what the conversation is. Like I like it to be, our format is like, let's do a case study. Let's have it be really practical so that, because that's one thing I like about Lenny's podcast is it's like super practical. So we usually prep it ahead of time. But the ones when I'm more prepped and where I have a better sense of these are the specific things we're going to say, I think it makes a better, a better interview. I find it, even though like to make it seem like you're off the cuff, but in fact you're quite planned, I think is what makes a good interview.
Interesting. Yeah. So feeding your brain a bunch of data about that person. I like being in the moment as well and starting broad. So at first in the pod, it's always hard to get some traction initially. I'm also working on that, and maybe that's a question I'll have for you. But at first, I try to keep it broad and let the guest mention what is exciting to their brains. And then I pick up with what's interesting with my brain. And next thing we know, we have a flowing and thriving conversation. How do you make a podcast less boring initially? How do you get traction fast?
That is a good question. So the one thing I do is I do not have the person really introduce themselves. I just do it really fast for them, like 2 sentences. Because often when I listen to a podcast and it's a long intro, I forward or skip. So that's the first thing. And then I do plan like how I'm gonna open it. And so like unlike with your podcast where you don't do the prep, I do most of the time do like a pre-call with them so that I'm pretty organized, so that we're like right into the thing. Also, the format is short, it's like 25 minutes, but it's, yeah, I try to like, we're talking about one thing, it's one case study, and we just like get straight into it and don't, beat around the bush with like context or whatever.
You studied the art of interjection also, like when's the right time to cut someone that is not going in the right direction, how to do that with empathy and make the conversation flow better?
I have not done that, but I do try. Like, I usually let the person sort of, finish their thought. But so far, because I'm pretty like set with we're going to do this, 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 I don't usually have that problem because it's usually like, okay, we're going to start with this, then we're going to give this example. So I haven't too much had to do that. But also, the one I do is edited, and so if it does do that, we can just cut and re-edit.
Right. What skills are you learning nowadays? What are you nerding out on?
A lot of AI things, actually, trying to figure out like how every time I get annoyed with some, manual process, I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what is the best way to do this? And then the other thing is doing better sales demos, because I realized like I was doing a demo and then I see the person's eyes and they're just bored, bored, bored. So I was like, all right, I have to get better at that. And then the last thing is just being better on a sales call. So I think it's between like AI magic tricks and being a better salesperson are the two things I'm working on.
Demos are really tricky. As a guy that did more than 10,000 of them in the last decade, like you can't really present something. Me automatically, when someone shows me slides, I completely get off. It's like, do you even treat me like a human? Like it's more like a conversation. So you may want to share your screen, but in like seconds, right? And not necessarily present slides. Really make it custom for the person that you have a view in front of you. I think it's exactly like a podcast call. It's being curious about the other. It's listening to them. It's hearing their pain and seeing if you can be useful. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's also, I do the mistake that I don't want to do, which is that you give too much lead in and too much unimportant information. It reminds me of a friend of mine. She said she was bookmarking the website called Just the Recipe. And I totally get it. If I want to cook something, I don't know the whole story of how your grandmother made. Just the recipe. So I'm trying to do my demo, just the demo. What is it? Just show me the platform, then we'll get into all the rest.
Yeah, another tip for that for the audience, I like pre-filtering my audience before they get onto a call. So when they're on a call, it's a closing call. It's like there's a 80% chance that they say yes. And if not, it's my fault because I didn't send enough information prior to the call. So I already know about their pain points. I already know about who they're targeting, what are their objectives this year. So yeah, that's a pretty good tip. If you're gonna do cold emails, what kind of GTM efforts you currently have going on?
Yeah, we do. I will answer, but I did want to say the one thing I have learned from you already, just prepping for this, I liked the feed of mails you sent me because I did feel like super prepped, even though we didn't do a call before. So I thought that was good. Yeah, we do a lot
Thanks.
of LinkedIn. So it's direct outreach on LinkedIn, some webinars and some emails, but yeah, mostly LinkedIn. And it's working.
Right. Yeah, I've been suspended off LinkedIn because I ran a humoristic newsletter, and long story short, they banned a bunch of cold outreach pages, Apollo, Seamless, and Lemless recently, and I was part of that wave. So I don't have good words to say about LinkedIn right now, but yeah, it's somewhat scalable. I mean, 20 connections a day, for example. I'm not sure if you invest in ads, the CAC is pretty high there, but yeah, the cold email, you should definitely start that. The CAC is extremely low. It's extremely scalable. You're not limited by LinkedIn, right? And when they're gonna decide that they want to shadow ban you, which is what they did before banning me, what kind of content do you put out on your LinkedIn and on your websites nowadays?
I talk a lot about learning and development. I talk about being a founder. I have a lot of things like women founders, women in leadership, because I'm just passionate about this totally stupid problem of like gender imbalance, just super dumb. Like, why don't we just fix it? Like, dumb, really dumb. So I talk about that and just like passion about education and yeah, things we're doing at Lynx, and then some, learner profiles and the impact we're able to make on different people that use our platform.
Real quick, how do we fix the women imbalance problem? Like, I feel, yeah, obviously women should start a business. That's my bias. I think they're great. They're different thinker. They're less testosterone-y, right? Which is good over the long term. Make really good entrepreneurs. Also chip on the shoulder. kind of syndrome, which make really good entrepreneurs. How would you solve it? Is it just like old men at the top restraining salary caps? Like, what is it?
I think it's from in companies. I think it's just like force it, like making sure you're promoting on an equal level. I also have a theory that a lot of women opt out because you start feeling uncomfortable. Like first you're half the people in the room, then you're 20% of the people in the room. Then, how many meetings have I been in when it's like me and 20 men? At some point, you're just like, I don't want to do it. And so I think like companies just make a more of an effort to keep women and to keep promoting at an even pace and not let people like after maternity leave or at different situations or after harassment or after a bullying or whatever, just make the effort to make people feel welcome. And then I think the same thing with investors and VCs, just like, you don't know what startup is going to succeed. Most of them are going to fail. So just do better and invest more equitably. Like most things you invest in aren't going to work, whether it's a man or a woman or green or whatever, I think just make a concerted effort. Like you have 5 seats on your board, put 3 men, 2 women, 3 women, 2 men. Just don't put 5 or 4 and 1, right? That's it.
Right. Yeah, old mental models that do not scale nowadays. Sylvie, where can we find out more about you?
So our website is lynxeducate.com, LYNX, and you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always posting things, and you can look for my podcast, Talent is Everywhere.
So that was Sylvie Milverton and Charles Cormier for